Good afternoon, and welcome to From Conversation to Contract, Keys to Getting Off on the Right Foot with Startups and Other Vendors, a health system CIO production sponsored by Techstars. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Health System CIO, and I'll be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll take them later in the program. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time, first we're going to go about 40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Ryan Cameron, VP of Technology and Innovation with Children's Nebraska, Michelle Stansbury, Associate Chief Innovation Officer and VP of IT Applications at Houston Methodist, Joel Venko, Chief Information and Digital Officer with Hartford Healthcare, and Nick Culbertson, Managing Director with Techstars, and then we will have our Q&A. So let's jump right in. Lots to talk about. Ryan, let's start with you. Can you give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Absolutely, be happy to. So, Ryan Cameron, I've been with Children's Nebraska for about 4 years. Previous to that, I'm a former Silicon Valley pirate myself. So, I worked for an AI startup for 2 years, helped them through their Series A, and learned a lot about market fit and really being fast and nimble, and this whole notion of something called competitive advantage, which seems to be a tough concept for health systems to really master. So, hopeful that I can talk a little bit about that and what I've learned over the last 4 years in that realm. So, healthcare is not my background. I get to pull a little bit of the rookie card compared to some of the esteemed panelists that we have with us this afternoon. So yeah, that's me. I look after the majority of the IT enterprise in the organization. So I do serve as a CIO in capacity, leading the data center, service desk, clinical applications, clinical engineering, the normal things that you would come to expect. But we also have a formal innovation program, our own LLC, a 10,000 square foot innovation center that we just opened last year, and some big aspirations and ambitions to really kind of bend the needle when it comes to pediatric healthcare and advancing.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Michelle?
Hi, good. I think it's good afternoon. I was going to say good morning, but Michelle Stansberry. I am the Associate Chief Innovation Officer, of course, and over our application suite as well at Houston Methodist. Have been here for 33 years. We're a large health system overall within the Houston market, somewhat known for our innovations that we have rolled out across our organization, and very happy to participate in this discussion today. I think it's very relevant. I have done this before, kind of with some startups of overall of helping them understand how best to get into a large health system such as Houston Methodist. So looking forward to overall our conversations.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. Joel?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Joel Venko, Chief Information Digital Officer at Hartford Healthcare. I've been here for about 3 years now and lead all strategy and technology at strategy over technology and digital and data over Hartford Healthcare. Hartford Healthcare is the largest health system in Connecticut. We're about 44,000 employees, 8 hospitals, just crested 7 billion. So fairly large organization, both digitally and physically. We've got a lot of presence, and our focus is to be the most consumer-centric healthcare system in the country. And our vision is to be the most trusted for personalized and coordinated care. A lot of what I do is certainly foundational to our strategy, but transformation is a large part of this role. I think is both Michelle and Ryan have articulated, and it's really quite a sort of an inflection point today in terms of where we're going with using data and digital capabilities to really move the delivery of care and the engagement of patients in a different way. Looking forward to talking about our current program and innovation and our also formal process for bringing in innovation to the organization. Prior to this, I was at Bay State Health for about 9 years, was the CIDO there also, but also founded, I'd like to say, one of the first innovation centers in healthcare systems. It was called TechSpring, and happy to talk about that and how we actually also brought in startups and new ideas and product ideas, even from current vendors, to try to get that competitive advantage for our health system. So glad to be here. Thanks for the invite, Anthony.
You got it, Joel. Thank you very much. Nick?
Hey everyone, I'm Nick Culbertson. I'm the Managing Director of Techstars AI Health Baltimore. For those who don't know, Techstars is a global accelerator that helps early stage startups that are led by founders building a better future for everyone. Our accelerator in Baltimore is one of 25 active accelerator programs across the globe, and we specialize in helping startups that are using AI and innovation to improve outcomes and economics for health systems across specifically the focus on the US. And like Ryan, before my current job, I used to work at a startup company called Panelists that used AI to help hospitals catch various types of fraud, specifically privacy security violations or clinical drug diversion. And so had an opportunity to work with two of the three hospital systems represented on this call. I won't say which ones because they're all three super innovative, and I have a lot of respect for all of them and excited about these panels today to talk about the complexities of evaluating vendors and early stage companies to ensure that there's a positive outcome out of the collaboration to generate actual a real return on investment and better outcomes for our patients.
Excellent. All right, let's jump right in. Ryan, we're going to start with you. What types of problems or challenges lend themselves to working with startups, or is it more a question of the type of technology being brought to the table? When is the perceived higher risk of working with a less mature organization warranted?
Wow. That's a big question, but I'll certainly do my best to try and chip away at it. You know, for pediatrics in particular, this could not be more relevant or more important. A statistic that, really kind of troubled me, but also surprised me and it really energized what I've been working on for the last couple of years really comes down to when you look at venture capital activity and startup activity in healthcare and then pediatrics side by side, what you see is about 2% or less of VC investment and healthcare startups focus on pediatrics. Yet, roughly 22% of the patient population in the United States requires pediatric care. So immediately you have this huge chasm where there's an absence of novel solutions that are really desperately needed to advance the quality of pediatric healthcare. And then you compound some really challenging things on top of that. And I'm sure my colleagues can talk about this in great detail. Being in healthcare right now is kind of like trying to do gymnastics through a Cheerio. You are managing on quicksand day to day in terms of being able to understand what's coming at you. We have rapidly evolving technology domains where it seems like it's by the week there is a significant change in what's possible, how things are charged, how things are billed. It's a really crazy place to be. And so the only groups that are scrappy enough, fast enough, and affordable that offer those novel solutions are startups. And so I actually think that startups are really the hope for pediatric healthcare. So we love them. Yes, that comes with a degree of risk. So when you think about these projects, they're easily disrupted. They don't have a huge list of clients, so they require a little more care and feeding. But in our experience, you'll also get a lot of attention, and you'll get a really highly dedicated, passionate group of people that are laser focused in addressing the needs that you have in front of you. So it's a pretty big trade-off. I think if you're looking at things that move very quickly, things that are going to be highly disruptive to your area, your care modalities, and when you need to have something quick, fast, and affordable, a startup is a great place to look.
That's a lot of great stuff in there, Ryan. And I appreciate that. We'll definitely follow up on that a little more. Michelle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of go on the other spectrum. We don't do much pediatrics. We're kind of we deal with mostly adults, but I will tell you, our goal overall of what we're trying to do is truly transform our organization. Because look, most health systems, and I will say ours, we've got lots of problems that we're trying to solve. And it is, you know, we look for solutions that we know will help us solve those problems. I will say we don't typically start with startups who just come with a concept, but we look for actually organizations that have a product. It might be in a smaller clinic, it may be in a smaller hospital, but they're really looking for a very large health system like Houston Methodist that can help them further develop their product and make it work for us so that then they could turn around and be able to say that they're using it at Houston Methodist. I will say it's the piece that overall I will say that is very, very important for us is looking for companies that overall have built in security into their product. It is, I can't tell you how many times that we've looked at a vendor, they haven't thought about it. They've thought more about process and what it is that they're trying to create for that health system and not really thinking about security. The other is, have they truly tried to integrate overall with the big EHRs? Many haven't. They haven't even had any kind of discussion with them. That takes longer. Sometimes we help them through that process, but they have a leg up if they've already gone through that process and done that, and they just need some additional help. But I will tell you, the biggest thing for us is trying to get into a pilot and into scale as quickly as possible. So we invest a lot of our time in some of these startups. And when I say startups, it's ones that already have products to help them really mature that product to get where we can get the usage out of it. It isn't just, I said, important to us is that, there's really three main areas we focus on: our patients, our clinicians, and making them more efficient and being overall within doing what they do best, which is take care of our patients, and then operational efficiencies. Every one of our organizations have got to become more efficient financially. So really has to start with the problem. When we start to talk with these, what problem are they solving for us and our organizations? And I tell a lot of startups, speak to that and not just about what your technology can do.
A lot of good stuff in there, Michelle, specifically about what you want them to come to the table with, minimums, kind of things they need to have, um, and also what you're looking for them to solve. So very interesting, and thank you for that. Joel?
Yeah, I think my colleagues did a great job articulating a lot of what we see as well. I think I'll say it again. I think it's really focusing on the problem to be solved. The technology in and of itself is not necessarily the thing that's interesting for us. We try to steer away from the shiny objects. It becomes a distraction more than a solution in many ways. And so, it is all about understanding what is the problem that we have that needs to be solved. And oftentimes, it's one of those situations where we have folks from the inside looking out and looking for those solutions rather than, those knocking on our door and saying, "Hey, we've got a solution. Do you have the problem that this fits with?" So, for those startups that are listening, I think some of it is just knowing the industry, knowing the organization you're approaching, understanding, the problems that could be solved, with potentially the solution that you've got. But I think to Michelle's point, a lot of what we start with are the current incumbent vendors and capabilities that we have today. And so, because of just the cost of healthcare overall and the cost to operate our organization, folks need to understand that we need to try to make what we have work better, work more optimally. The percentage of use of the systems that we've bought, certainly feel, de minimis compared to the full use of that product. So, we're looking to get as much out of that investment as possible. Typically, the startups that work well are those that, number one, integrate, as Michelle said, to these big vendors, but they also fill in these gaps that these big vendors might not be able to quickly, or at least in the immediate time frame, sort of provide as a solution. So we look for those startups and solutions that really can fill in those gaps that perhaps our incumbent vendors aren't able to provide. In terms of just answering your other question around the perceived higher risk, and what's the how much risk do you take on with organizations that are, perhaps, really less mature, more nascent? Again, I think a lot of it has to do with the problem, uh, the immediate problem to be solved, the level of the problem that we are trying to solve, how critical it is. And we'll take pretty high risks when we feel like we've got, a lot of benefit in that solution. So as an example, we have an access problem. I think all health systems have access problems, and we believe that one of the areas that access problem is most prevalent is in primary care, the starting point of a lot of our, patients' journeys. And so, we worked with a startup to put together what we now call HHC 24/7, and that app, but not just an app, it's really a service, a primary care service that's 24/7, virtual 24/7 for our community members, was something that, we went hard and fast at. It took, it was about a 2.5, 3 month, implementation with a startup that just had a couple of large organizations working with them. And we said, look, if we're going to work with you guys, we want to be first, and we want you guys to focus on our stuff, so we can get there fast. And that's what they did. And there was a lot of risk because there was an AI component to it that we had to manage and mitigate. But we knew that the problem that we needed to solve had high value to our patients. And so we were able, at least across the leadership team, agree to the perceived high risk of working on something that was at some level novel, but also it hadn't necessarily been proven in the industry as a mature product. So, I think if the problem to be solved is critical, organizations like us will take calculated risks at a high level to really achieve those capabilities that we want to provide to particularly our patients who are looking for care or otherwise.
Excellent, Joel. Thank you. A lot of good stuff in there. Nick, your thoughts?
So many great comments from the panelists. So I think I'll just mostly reinforce, going back to what Michelle said about starting with the problem and not focusing on the features of the solution. Globally, there's two types of startups. There's startups that have a solution that are solving a problem, and there's the ones that start with a problem and think of the solution on how to build that. In health tech, it's really hard to start with a solution and push that into without identifying the problem. And so the first question on our Techstars application is define the problem. What problem are you solving, and how well do they really understand that? And then looking at the solution and focusing on that, is the solution something that's really actually going to have positive impact for the health systems and with a meaningful ROI? It is tough to build innovation in health tech because of all the complexities that the other panelists have mentioned, the complexities of regulatory, privacy, security, but then also integration and working with the larger vendors. And in this world, if your product is, only a little bit better than an incumbent, there's not going to be a willingness to change because you have to have something that's that much bigger. And so I think what's important in this space is the partnership that happens between hospital systems, health systems broadly, and startups. It is really hard for founders to solve problems alone without really understanding the intricacies. And so that means two things for me. That means usually I'm recruiting startups that have founder market fit. They're coming out of hospital systems. They know this space. They know the problems intimately. They're clinicians, they're administrators, or they have some kind of insider knowledge that helps them really understand the problem. Or the second part for me is that they're working really closely with maybe their first beta site or first few beta pilot sites, and working with experts on this, like the ones on this panel, to really help them understand. And I really like Michelle said, like maybe they're established a little bit, but they need a little bit more steering towards that final solution. And so it is really impossible to be successful and on bringing a new innovation to market without that kind of partnership and the customers who can help understand navigate the complexities of healthcare.
If I could just add one more
Please.
thing and kind of bring on what Nick was talking about, the other thing that's really important for us for, in working with any kind of startup or organization is, can they articulate what a return on investment would be for that health system? Some of them are coming in just talking about how they can solve a problem, but have they truly thought about what overall, if the organization was to invest, what kind of return we could expect from it?
Do they really understand the numbers involved, Michelle? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I can't tell you, because part of that is overall what we look of when they tell us what they believe the return can be, we'll look at that overall of determining, okay, should we invest or not? And then that also helps us determine kind of key metrics that we want to build for that pilot to determine whether or not it's going to be successful. I mean, again, I will bring back most health systems, and Joel, I think you said it, they're not doing tech just for tech's sake. I mean, they're doing it to transform and solve problems in the organization. And one of those problems is we have to become financially responsible.
All right. So interesting. Nick, you mentioned the idea that we talked about the importance of understanding the problem. If you're a startup, you're creating something, you need to understand the problem in the health system that you're solving for. And one of the ways that that can happen is to have clinicians on staff, right? Nick, you mentioned if you have people that have lived through the problem, helping you create a solution to the problem, that can help rather than just trying to guess and as best as you can understand the problem until you get close enough that a health system or a healthcare organization lets you in and helps you refine it. So I'd like to go around the horn and just uh, talk a little bit about the importance of having clinicians on a startup team. Michelle, if you want to jump in, is that you mentioned a number of things that are very important to you: security. Are you in a gap where the EHR is not offering a service? And have you spoken with, integrated with that? A number of things you say are important. What about the idea of having clinicians on involved in the startup?
So on the health system or in the startup organization?
The importance of the startup having clinicians on their team.
It's very helpful because then they'll understand the workflow. They'll understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. I mean, I will tell you, many of the organizations that we deal with, especially in the clinical space, I will tell you the startup is probably started by a physician or someone who worked overall within a health organization that understands overall how we run the organization to be able to articulate very well what were their solution? What problem is it solving? How could you end up making it easier for your clinicians? I mean, so much is about AI today, but I think it's also for those individuals, what is that AI doing? Because remember, from a health system perspective, we're very careful about looking at overall how the AI is built. And we still believe that a human needs to be involved, especially on the clinical side of things, that a physician or whatever needs to be involved in looking at that. So what helps overall, because we have our clinicians engaged overall in our innovation space, so when they can talk clinician to clinician, it overall helps when understanding what it is that their solution. We just looked at overall from an imaging solution that we just recently brought on. So it was very important overall for them to be able to communicate with our radiologist and our cardiologist.
Yeah, Ryan, your thoughts around this? Is it a bit of a relief if a startup has some clinicians on the team, and at least if you're going to bring them to other people in the organization to have discussions, they're going to be able to talk the talk.
I don't think the startup has to have, clinicians or physicians involved, but it certainly does help. I would say that, the what we're seeing, what we're observing is really interesting in that it feels like every doctor is an inventor now.
Yeah.
And it feels like every nurse is going to be an inventor very soon too, because the advent of vibe coding, the fact that I can just go do prompt engineering and I can make an app. I don't even think we buy software anymore. I think we buy developers. I think that's the reality of what we're looking at in this landscape. So I think it's a very democratic thing to be open to startups, whether they're clinician led or whether they're led by somebody in a particular vertical of technology or engineering that wants to be involved in healthcare. For me, clinician involvement, the most important thing is about trust and about promoting a culture that is open to startups and open to really advancing healthcare. When I first started at Children's, our innovation output was okay. It would definitely did not, rank where we wanted it to. And now we've got so many ideas. We've got multiple parking lots, and we're, trying to figure out how to prioritize all of the feedback that we get from clinicians that are very excited about it. And the way that we did that, Michelle really touched on this really well, is the notion of having highly technical people talk to clinical people, speak that common language, and really understand that product market fit really well. And it's transformative because it helps from a design perspective, whether you're just wireframing something or you're actually, hard coding things. And it really helps with that trust factor. I could go out and I could buy all kinds of things that I think are cool, but that doesn't mean that our clinicians are going to want to adopt them or going to want to use them. So it's kind of a fool's errand if you don't have everybody involved, but I don't think it's a deal breaker if it's not a physician-led company.
Joel, any thoughts on either this idea of having clinicians on the team, or you can touch more on that dynamic of you having that acute problem, I think around primary care that you wanted to solve. Sounded like a very interesting situation. Either one you want to touch on there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Ryan, but I do see Michelle's point. I think it really depends on the solution that's being developed or offered, and actually, it also depends, I believe, on the maturity of the product. So for instance, the solution that I was talking about with the primary care HHC 24/7 virtual capability, believe it or not, the founders and much of the senior leadership team aren't clinicians, but they have clinicians who are on the advisory panel, or committee, if you will. They have folks who they've spoken with, and they truly understand the problem that they're solving, as well as understand the culture of the health systems or healthcare writ large that they're dealing with. I think if you're not going to have clinicians on board, you better know how to speak to the constituents or those that are stakeholders, as well as understand the culture, the environment of the industry that you're trying to address a problem in. And that often, I think, that just not even for startups and people who are decidedly feeling like that they can solve healthcare writ large, I think they have to understand it's a whole different ballgame. And I'm not suggesting it's impossible to solve our problems or challenges, but healthcare is complex, and it's not as easy as what folks, I think, on the outside would say it might be, or what they come in high velocity and trying to fix the healthcare world. I mean, we've seen some of the giants try to come in multiple times, and they've not solved it, right? So just sort of understand your stakeholders, understand the environment. But I do believe that whether you're focusing on solutions that address clinical or clinician problems, or for that matter, patient problems, or non-clinician, non-patient, but administrative problems, you do need to have a voice somewhere in your organization that can articulate for you, how these people think, what the context is of that particular part of the organization might be. And you have to have that person on staff, because otherwise it is a fool's errand if you're not including those folks in that type of discussion and the design overall. I'd also lastly say, just in terms of kind of overall sort of makeup of the startup, I think part of the reason why startups do reach out to organizations like us is they may not have those individuals on their teams, or they're looking for that kind of advisement. So we get that as well, and that's part of the process. Our process, our standard innovation process, is that there may be a clinical champion that they borrow or they leverage. That kind of time investment is sort of how we see some level of investment exchange, or you're going to get to some of those questions later, but that's where we start to talk about is the investment in time of our experts, rev cycle expert, clinical expert, maybe patient family expert, is that worth the time and investment in helping this product, the startup, sort of continue to mature, and what does that mean for us, right? So that's the other consideration here is, and what we understand is why startups reach out to us is because, you know, they believe they have a solution to a problem. They may not have the full solution fully vetted. Maybe there's a last mile, and an expert like our clinician is what's going to help bridge that gap.
Nick, any more thoughts? You know, you're meeting with these startups, you're trying to help vet them and then prepare ones you feel are appropriate for the market to approach potential customers. What are you looking for in terms of gauging whether or not they understand the problem? We talked about the importance of solving for a problem, and you're trying to make sure, I assume, when you review them and engage with them, that they truly do understand the problem. You mentioned having clinicians on the team as being certainly helpful. And I would imagine you say, okay, that's good. You practice Dr. So-and-so, you're here. Sometimes you maybe don't see that. Sometimes it's more of technology operators. And then maybe you have a little bit of a concern and you're trying to further vet them on understanding the problem. What are your just general thoughts around doing that?
So for accelerators, the trick is, how do you find founders before they're founders? You want to find people really early enough that you can make an investment in and help them get to market in a true way. So the goal is to have product market fit. If you have product market fit, that means that your solution is solving a real problem and you're going to get customer traction. And the way that you get product market fit is you start with founder market fit. And that's a general term that describes everything that Ryan, Joel, and Michelle are describing. How well does the founder really understands the problem? Now, that might mean because they're a clinician, but I think Ryan said this, that they don't have to be a clinician. They could just really understand the space really well. For example, we have a team in our current cohort that's working on rev cycle payment denials on the provider side. And they actually worked at a big payer building the denial system. So they weren't clinicians, but they understand how rev cycle works from the payer perspective. And now they're switching from Goliath to the David team to help to fight that battle, just as an example. So we look for their understanding of the space, but sometimes it's not. The founder market fit may not be in the founders. Maybe it's from the team broadly, which means they're partnering with the health system that's working well with them. In my own personal experience with my startup, you know, my co-founder and I were just med students. Like, what do we know as med students? Like, there's so little, you know, at that point, so early in the journey. But we worked really closely with our customers, and our first product was in the privacy security space. And we actually worked very closely with IT, IS, and privacy to understand space, and eventually recruited on our team people from the cyber community and people from the privacy space as well. And that gave us a lot of credibility to see that we were recruiting talent from those industries. And then again, when we switched to our second product, we went to the pharmacy space. What if privacy security have the cut to do with pharmacy? Well, a lot of compliance workflows are the same, especially around audit trail analysis. But what we did at that point was we recruited really bright pharmacy techs and pharmacists to work and represent our product and help us with the product discovery. And so anyway, I just want to reiterate that the goal is to have founder market fit to get to product market fit. And sometimes that's through the founder and their own background. But I think if there is gaps, it really comes down to who are your early beta customers and your early partners to fill in those gaps.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick.
Now, Anthony,
Go ahead, Michelle, please.
I'm gonna just go ahead and add on here.
Yeah.
I agree somewhat with Joel and Ryan. You know, we tend to be very focused in our clinical space right now and the things that we're trying to do. I would say early on when we were focused on access, right, or the revenue cycle. No, you don't necessarily have to have clinician involvement. I think when you start to get into clinical workflow, yes, I think it's overall helpful that they have that level of understanding. I mean, look, the whole agentic AI space right now is free game. I mean, there are so many things that are coming up that you could use for patient access. You could use on the revenue cycle. You could also use it overall, you know, internally. I think that there's going to be a lot of great new discoveries that are coming out overall that are going to be beneficial to all our institutions. But I think it's clearly, what are you trying to accomplish? And, you know, my lens happened to be from all of the clinical things that we're trying to do right now. And it is very helpful when you have people who are clinicians on that team that can really articulate overall from a workflow perspective. So that was my lens coming from, but agree wholeheartedly with the other ones. You know what? If they're working in the revenue cycle, no, you don't
Right.
necessarily need a clinician in that space.
Right. It's gonna make sense. I'd like to go around the horn and just so, because I'm thinking as we talk about this, um, we've got two different flows that this can go. You have the idea of being approached by a startup cold, meaning you're not looking, you didn't ask them, but they're trying to make traction. They're trying to approach health systems. This is what Nick is helping them with. So I'd like the first piece of advice I'd like is for you to give startups that are going to come anyway. Whether or not you want them to come, they're coming. So if they're coming, they're going to knock on your door. You're going to knock on my door. Here's what I want you to have. Here's how to have your business in order if you're going to come knock. And then Joel touched on the other flow, which is most hospitals prefer to solve for problems that they have. And when you're solving for a problem you have, Joel, you want to investigate the market, right? There may be people on your team, meaning operations has told us there's an issue, or we know there's an issue. We think there could be some technologies out there to help. So we're going to investigate the market, and we're going to include startups. So as a start, giving advice to the startup, when you're the one from at the hospital looking, where do they need to be? And what condition do they need? How do they get found when you're the one doing the looking, right? So two ideas. One is they knocking on your door. What do you want the condition to be? They come in. And the other idea is when you go looking, where do they need to be found and what do they need to have in place? So let's go around the horn. Ryan, let's go to you first.
Wow, tough question. And I'll tell you why that's a tough question. I can't tell you how many phone calls, solicitations, emails, pings, cross-selling requests, LinkedIn messages, messages to members of my team, messages to the CEO. Like, if you are in healthcare sales, my heart goes out to you because it's a really tough place to be. And folks like myself that have a vested interest in making big decisions on investments, we're tired. We are really fatigued by the classic sales process. So I'll tell you that cold calling isn't going to work for you. I don't want to go to your webpage if I find you and have to sign up for a demo. I want to see the demo right away.
Mm,
And my advice to you is look for that lighthouse customer. So when you're approaching a hospital, offer up the opportunity to be a partner from day one, and look for that hospital or hospital system that you admire and you would love to be a partner with. This is very much a organization and an industry that's all about dyads. And we've been talking a lot about that today, the notion of making sure that providers and clinicians are closely working with technologists to make great solutions. And that analogy carries out to the organizational level as well. I tend to find startups that I really like from groups like KidsX, from iSpy. They're typically not-for-profits that are spun out of children's hospitals that are implicitly designed to incubate and accelerate pediatric solutions. We have one at Children's Nebraska. We call it Bright Foundry. And so we do have people that just approach us cold, and then we have novel solutions that we're actively seeking. So if, look for hackathons, look for hospitals that are offering activities where they say, hey, we're trying to solve this wicked problem with access or affordability or quality and safety, and then pitch into those sorts of things. So my advice is abandon classic sales techniques.
uh-huh.
Tell me what your product is all about. Put that on the web page without any sort of wall or barrier where you got to load me into your CRM. And come out of the gate with a really cool, interesting, exciting offer. And I'm tossing around this word lighthouse customer, but we love that. Hospitals are, competitive organizations. We're also cooperative too. So we share secrets with each other very, very openly and frequently because we care about patients. But deep down inside, don't fool yourself. We all want to win. And we have tremendous pride in our organization and how well our patients are cared for. And when we're able to articulate those things and send a strong message to say, for example, Children's Nebraska is the first to do XYZ. When we're able to do that, that's an incredible investment for us because it's more than just going out and buying more software. It is problem focused. It's starting from a whole new lens. It's very patient centric. Those are the types of value propositions that you need coming into it. So yeah, don't cold call. Don't send me the email, please.
Got it. Got it. Joel?
Yeah, I think, now more than ever, we've got a lot of health systems who have innovation programs. And so, when I started TechSpring, gosh, 2015, there were very few. I mean, it was one of those things where even Becker's was like, here are the 30 innovation programs that are out there, right? Now health systems, I think many of them have some level of an innovation program. For us, for example, if you go to our website, Harvard Healthcare website, if you scroll down, there's an innovation, link where you can actually submit through our website. What is it that you're, trying to solve for? What solution do you have that's solving for a problem? And it'll lead you through that whole process. I would imagine others are doing the same. So I think, to Ryan's point, don't send an email to the CIDO or the VP of innovation. Put it through its paces, and you're probably going to land at least a conversation with an analyst. I think that's sort of number one. There's always these kind of niche conferences or meetings. Brian named a number for children's focused IT perhaps, but there are other programs out there. I won't name any because Anthony, I don't know if they've paid you anything, so I'm not going to say any, but there's small, niche sort of meetings that they could pay a small freight to get in front of CIDOs and others. That's one other way to do it. I do think though that, partnerships with, folks like Techstars or even managed services organizations where you can, talk about the solution that you've got. I've had a number of startups who came to me through these managed service firms who, help with, some of our infrastructure related, kind of issues and operations. And they'll say, hey, are you guys interested in solving a problem like this? We sort of know this startup or what have you. And of course, we'll still put them through our paces, but, it's those kinds of introductions that are much easier to kind of address. At least for us, it's not inundation, but it's a conversation that we're having with a known partner, or maybe it's another fellow CIDO who says, hey, I saw the startup that is interesting and they're trying to solve a problem that I hear you have or you're trying to solve. You might want to connect with them through that. So those are the kinds of ways or channels I think that are most useful, at least the ones that I've been paying attention to.
Excellent. Michelle?
Completely agree. Cold call does not work. I think probably my colleagues here would say, I don't answer numbers I don't recognize. And unfortunately, they are getting very creative by calling at night and calling on weekends. When it's kind of, I feel like it's my time, maybe not. I will say, I mean, Ryan alluded to this and maybe Joel as well. Healthcare, people may think it's very big industry, but it is very small and unique. We are willing to share a lot. We have held many kind of open houses to share what we've been doing here at Houston Methodist. If you ask anyone, we have 35,000 innovators. So we get a lot from overall some of our staff when they're going to these different conferences, they're walking the exhibit halls, they're looking and seeing at things. But I would say, yes, we're always interested. I mean, I don't want to say we're not, because sometimes you can get some of the best solutions that are out there. It could be from a cold call, but I highly recommend, because look, my email's out there everywhere. Send me an email, but you know what? In bold letters and very big, what is your problem you're trying to solve for me, so that I clearly know what it's about instead of having to read, 10 paragraphs down before I actually get to it. We also here in Houston, there is an innovation center called the ION. We are the only healthcare solution or vendor or system that's in there, but we also believe in cross-industry. I really love to see what other industries are doing that could potentially solve a problem for us. And I will say when it came to overall, when we were looking for an RTLS vendor, we found one that was in stadiums. So to be able to help us. So don't necessarily just always have to be in healthcare. Yes, when it's clinical, but I do like to hear from some of the other startups that are potentially in other industries and what we can work with.
All right, Nick, here's what I'm going to ask you. Obviously, you are representing Techstars, which represents startups. You're involved in the process of sort of working with them, vetting them, selecting ones that are promising. If you were making a pitch to our panel and to healthcare IT executives at hospitals, let's say those that are on the less adventurous side, a little more reluctant to work with startups, what would be your pitch for them to give more of a look and more of a chance to startups? What would be the things that you would say they should look for and that should make them more comfortable that perhaps they're not taking into account?
Well, I do think what Ryan said about a lighthouse customer is so critical. Showing that you can do it once with one customer is kind of the most important. The 0 to 1 is the most important part. And then what Michelle and Joel were saying about the network effect, you guys go to each other's peers, you hear what he was doing. That's how you start to scale is, we got our first customer and that CIO made 10 phone calls and that turned into our first 10 customers. That's it. That's how it should play out. And so but what I will say is that not every hospital system is the best customer. We work with an academic medical center to start. They're not always the best first customers. And so it really depends on your product and who is the right ideal customer profile for you. What problem are you solving? And making that match. To answer your question, Anthony, I think the reason to work with startups is not just to be the first mover and to be the innovator, but also to share on the upside as well. And one thing that I help a lot of startups and hospital systems navigate through is how to come up with creative terms to de-risk a pilot agreement with a startup. So for example, there's nothing saying you should have to pay up all up front and lose money if the pilot doesn't work. You can have deferred payments based on milestones that are achieved. So you achieve this success criteria and we will pay you. But then also there should be maybe some return on the upside as well. If this is really successful, we get equity in your company and we get to share on the success because we're giving you our know-how and our knowledge from our experts, the 3,500 experts across our industry. Every person you talk to is going to make your product better, and we should get some upside on that as well. And so I don't think every hospital system should work with startups, but I think the ones that do should be thinking about, one, how they de-risk for both sides creatively, but then also share on the upside. And then if you guys don't mind, I want to go back to the cold outreach because I'm gonna be the devil advocate on this because I see it from both sides. I get so much cold outreach, it drives me insane. And I agree with everything that you guys said it's the wrong type of outreach. The number of times people emailed me when I was at Pertennis and said, we could increase your revenue in the next 30 days. And I was like, I have a 12-month sales cycle. How are you going to do that? That's impossible. You don't know my business. But I'll advocate for two things on the cold outreach. It's unfortunate that lots of deals happen through cold outreach. They're very small numbers. It's a numbers game, but it does happen. It's how our industry is based. If we could solve it and have some better way to not use cold outreach, I'm all for that. But until we do, there is an appreciable number that works. And so from your guys' perspective, ignoring cold outreach actually is helpful. If that message comes through and it's like not, if a founder or a startup can't describe their value proposition in like a matter of 6 words, you should ignore them because they haven't figured it out yet. And so you guys are actually helping. I tell founders if they're like, oh, I've called 100 people and only one person responded, that's data point right there. And lack of response tells you you're not actually understanding the problem, you're not articulating it well. But it's really unfortunate that actually a lot of cold outreach does turn to great customer traction. And so what I tell founders is figure out how to describe your solution as elegantly as possible. Michelle hit this, like don't do it in paragraphs, don't do a long email, but you should just in a very short number of words. And if that doesn't catch someone's eye and resonate, 1 in 100, you're not doing it right. So
Yeah. That's
tough
a
part of
good
the
point,
market.
Nick. But I mean, you gotta let's just focus on or emphasize the point you made. And you said this before in our other discussions. It may be 1 in 100, but that doesn't mean that's a bad equation, right? That can be a very if because you said 0 to 1 could be the most important thing.
Mhm.
So 1 in 100 would be wonderful. Every founder would sign up for that. I'll do 100 outreaches if I can get one, and that 0 to 1 is the key to my business starting. So it's a numbers game, as you said.
That's
Um,
right.
Let me get a question in from our audience, Bill Spooner, industry legend. If you don't know him, you should. To what extent do you find startup vendors willing to share in the risk they get paid as you realize the benefits? Building on what Nick had said about creative arrangements, building on what Joel had said about his scenario with the primary care and how Ryan touched on this too. There's a lot of you who touched on the idea of all the upside of working with a startup in terms of the attention and the focus you get on this critical problem you have that you may have really have some speed you need. So Joel, you said you were very happy. I want you all focused on me. Like we've got an acute problem. You're the right fit. I don't want you focused anywhere else. I want you right here. We're going to help. So when you get that perfect match, you're sort of willing to go on all in a sense. But as Nick did say, there are a lot of creative arrangements you can have here, and I think that's a very interesting idea. So let's go around the horn. We're almost out of time, but Joel, your thoughts.
Yeah, no, and Nick, you sort of touched on it very, very well, I believe, is, look, I think there are creative arrangements. We certainly have a process that's a standard process where we go through the discussion with the startup. Look, we're going to make an investment in time, capacity, yeah, our sort of intellectual capital, and maybe even, actual capital that we would invest in. So what's the return on that investment? And so, we're very deliberate about that. It's not just about, it is absolutely first and foremost, sorry, solving the problem that we're looking at. No question about that. So we're not, just like I said, it's not about the technology only, nor is it about the investment. I mean, we're not looking for the next Google, but look, if we believe that it's enough, it's worth our time and capital, intellectual capital, and actual cash to invest into this company, we ought to have a return. So we have a process for warrants, equity, et cetera, that I would encourage both the startup and health systems to really have an understanding that that's happening now. That's part of the innovation process. That's part of the exchange. So that is a core part of it. And the other part is, uh, we want to know that you're really fully invested, just like we are, in making sure that this solution is going to actually achieve its suggested output or outcome, experience, outcome, et cetera. And so those are the things that we look for. And certainly we have a process. And I want to emphasize that it's really important to have a process. These things aren't by accident. These things shouldn't be just sort of an exercise and you're kind of just doing it, sort of nonchalantly. As Michelle had mentioned, it really is about spending your time wisely and focusing on what matters most. And this process, this innovation process, this engagement with startups and even current vendors in new product development have to be a process that you both understand is standard work.
Yep. Michelle?
Completely agree with Joel overall on what he said. I mean, it's for us, it's, coming in, understanding what our process, we've done several kind of, yes, you know, contractually, it is overall what the pricing overall is because we're investing so much of our knowledge, what kind of, we don't want to be treated just like any other customer. But it's also some we have invested in, I think it's a combination of overall of what we see, what the risk is to the organization and what we believe that the return can possibly be. I do want to say this for all of the startups that are out there. If you have a product and it's worked well for you, continue to evolve that product because you will quickly find yourself outdated by some of these big EHR vendors that are nipping at your heels very, very quickly to be able to integrate that into their product. But you're very nimble, a lot more so than what these big EHR vendors are. So just continually keep evolving and being nimble and put more into your product so that you stay relevant to the health systems that are out there.
Yeah, very good stuff. Ryan?
Having a standard package works and helps. Startups move fast, they need to move fast. So if you're hopeful to close a creative deal where there's either royalty, equity, some sort of profit sharing, IP transfer, any of those things that are value adds for your organization to have alternative revenue streams so that you can contribute positively to affordability and accessibility of care. You need a standard package, and you need to be able to articulate that quickly and clearly. And you shouldn't be reinventing the wheel with every single startup that you talk to. So that's really important for you to move fast. And I would say don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot of the times, hospitals are like, well, it's really expensive and we just have to pay, the fee, and it's the standard vendor to customer relationship. Flip your paradigm. Startups are all about partnership, and you have a tremendous opportunity to really do something incredible. And my encouragement is we need moonshots. We need big time ideas, and they're going to come from startups. And so have a willingness and an openness to negotiate with them, think outside the box, and have that standard package ready, because the next great opportunity could be right around the corner.
Awesome. Nick, we're going to give you the last word.
I'm trying to think. I wasn't prepared for the last word.
Oh,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Can I ask a question
sure.
to our panelists?
Sure, we'll
Okay.
go around the horn. That'll be your last word.
Yeah, my last word. I'll turn it back to you guys. So we've been talking about all the startups coming to you guys, and one of my things I love to hear from you folks or people in your positions is, what are the problems that you need solved that you're not hearing startups come for? Well, if you could wave a magic wand and say, "Man, I wish some person would solve this problem," what is that?
All right, who are we going to put on the spot first? Joel, you took yourself off mute. You're in.
Yeah, I firmly believe that we still have a data problem in healthcare. It's the thing that's for me, the biggest problem to solve, because everything that we're doing with AI, advanced analytics, all of that sort of, the digital twins that we could be creating all rely on data, and data in healthcare still is a challenge. 70 to 80% of our data is not standardized. It's still right, and so it's continuing to grow. We've got a lot of data exhaust. So I would say the sort of the harnessing of that data is really key, and I think that's the problem. I'd say the biggest problem to solve, because there's a downstream effect and impact that I think is a multiplier if we can solve that.
Ryan?
Telehealth. We live in Nebraska. We're the only freestanding children's hospital in the state, and we provide care through our neighboring states as well. We want exceptional, high quality care available for everyone, regardless if you live in the metro or not. Rural systems are closing, struggling, operating in the red. That situation isn't going to get any better. So if you have novel solutions, particularly for pediatrics and telehealth or telemedicine, we'd love to hear from you.
Love it. Love it. Michelle?
I would agree somewhat with Joel. Overall, I think the more that we can look to standardize data, it's overall going to help us. The other thing is most health systems are having to learn to do more with less. And so how is it that you can help the health system from an operational perspective be more efficient? And that can be in many areas.
And as you said, Michelle, show me some numbers, right?
That's it.
There you go. All right. Wonderful, wonderful conversation, but unfortunately we are about out of time. Regarding continual education, you could use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording is ready for viewing. If you want to work with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team and go to our website to register for upcoming panels. With that, I want to thank this wonderful panel, Ryan Cameron, Michelle Stansbury, Joel Venko, and Nick Culbertson, and I want to thank Techstars for making this event possible and you for attending. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.